And for anyone that did not listen to part one of this early rising podcast palooza, you're going to find that opening sound very concerning, but it is a reference to Becky's arch nemesis bird that causes early rising for her in Port Macquarie.
Oh my gosh! Well, it wasn't in Port Macquarie; it was in Sydney. So
Oh, sorry,
it was
Sydney.
it was on a golf course. So I don't know. Like, and I just keep, and I said to my husband Ben, "Look, is there a specific type of bird?" And he was like, "It's a crow. Like, it's just a crow." Anyway, I'm sure we'll get some feedback anyway from that. But maybe they were just golf course birds, just having a crack.
Golf
I don't know.
course birds telling you to F off. All right, we are back for part 2 of early rising. We talked a lot about last week about the environmental factors, a lot of the things that are within our control as the parents in this scenario. And this week we're going a little bit more into the body clock side of things, because that 5 a.m. is an alarm system in a lot of babies' brains. It becomes very habitual very quickly. We're also going to talk about how to actually sleep train it out once you've got all of your ducks in a row. And also how sometimes parents can accidentally reinforce the early rise.
I don't know about you, but the back of my ears are sore from laughing so hard. The old bird strikes again. So
the old
anyway.
bird strikes again. And
So
little
yes.
does everyone know that we've just spent an hour giggling and catching up before we've even hit record. So RSI.
I'm excited to get into episode 2 because I really love the idea that we're explaining the ins and outs of early rise, because there's so many moving parts to correcting it. And it is a really important factor to consider when you are rolling out your sleep work, because often it's like, I will often say it's the last 5% of sleep training. So if we're working with families, we're ironing everything else out. Ordinarily, you'll have the early rise as your last little tidbit just to work on. And it's a game changer. Having a little one that just sleeps that little bit extra in the morning can make a huge world of difference to how your mornings start, how your day progresses. If you're going off to work, you'll probably feel a little happier. Getting that little bit of extra sleep and all the things that go along with it. So working on the early rise is an investment, and your future self will love you for it. So I'm really excited to get into this.
It's one of those things that, as a sleep consultant, despite working with so many families with early rising and knowing how common it is, it's something I can't personally say I have experienced. You are significantly more tired than I have ever been, despite me having 2 children. And the idea for me of chronically starting my day between 4 and 5, not only do I feel tired just thinking about that, but the anxiety of going into the night, like just wait. I mean, I get anxiety about my alarm going off in the 6s, it just doesn't have to be like that. And so hopefully by the end of these 2 episodes, parents feel like they've got a bit of a plan to do, as you said, that last 5% and bring it home and get to a later rise so that everyone can just move forward from 5 a.m.
I guess the aim is for you to feel confident to tackle it, that you don't sit in this camp of my baby can only do so many hours, be confident and curious enough to go, you know what, I'm going to give it a red hot crack. I'm going to get all my ducks lined up. We're going to go for it and see how it ends up, because you will probably be very pleasantly surprised with your little one.
And that's a good point, because a lot of families, understandably, and I just got an email today about it from a mother as well, presume their baby is a low sleep total baby. And whilst I absolutely appreciate, I need more sleep than my husband, my son, he needs a little bit less sleep than my daughter, I never presume when I start with a family that a baby is automatically a low sleep total baby. There are so many things for us to try. And the tricky thing is that an overtired baby presents as having low sleep totals. And it seems confusing because you would think that, okay, well, if you're that tired, that you're overtired, just go to sleep, stay asleep, sleep in. I'll see you at 9 a.m. Like, take your time, take that 2-hour long lunchtime nap. And it just doesn't work like that. They end up fighting sleep, having poor quality sleep. That natural spike in cortisol is setting that alarm off at 5 a.m. It then becomes a habit. We then have day scheduling issues. And so the cycle continues. So I never, and I know you're the same, Beck, go into a package with a family thinking, oh, this is a low sleep total baby.
Yeah, no, never.
I offer as much sleep as we can, and then we've got wriggle room to pull back if and when needed. And babies surprise their families, their parents all the time by actually not being a low sleep total baby.
I'd say it's if we're going to do stats, I'm just going to pull. I would honestly think 95% of my families would come in thinking that their early rise is never going to resolve. And the joy that they feel when, oh my gosh, it was, holy moly, we got a 6:45 wake, we got a 6:15 wake, anything between 11 and 12 hours overnight, I think is super realistic. And we're talking for little ones from the age of, let's just say 4 months to 2 years, 3 years. 11 to 12 hours overnight is what we're realistically looking for. And I guess that sort of, we have to do a little bit of a calculation then in terms of like the timing that your little one would wake, because I feel like maybe there is a number that families will put on a rise that it needs to be, say, 7 a.m. for it not to be considered an early rise. But really, in fact, what we're looking for is 11 to 12 hours overnight. So we have to sort of do a little simple calculation in terms of, well, what time
kind of
did our little
reverse
one...
engineer it to get to bedtime, to get to that last nap, to get to the, and then the first nap. Yeah. And I know we touched on that sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just know that we touched briefly on that in last week's episode, that, if a baby's going to bed at 5:30 p.m. and then he's waking between 4:30 and 5:30 in the morning, it feels like early rising, but it is fact not. The math just ain't mathin'. They're on the wrong time zone.
Yeah. So do those calculations just to make sure that you're just not on a dicky schedule. And then, then we're going to sort the early rise out for you.
So speaking of dicky schedules, one of the main, I don't think I've ever said that.
A dicky schedule.
But I
feel
like
so
it.
old. Like, I feel really old.
No, it's like you're bringing back new, like, forget millennial lingo, and we're going with dicky schedule. So speaking of, one of the main causes that I see when I read through a sleep log that can be reinforcing an early rise is that a baby's first nap of the day is too early. We have a podcast episode a few episodes back about why we love a 9:30 a.m. nap for babies on 2 naps, sort of under 12 months. And we briefly touched on it then, but in the context of this early rising, what I commonly see is, and I'll make up an example, that a 6-month-old baby is awake at 5 a.m. Parents try everything to get their baby back to sleep. No dice. Understandably, come 7:15, that baby is tired, and so they go down for a nap at 7:30. And I understand the logic of, if we push them through to the scheduled nap time, they are going to be overtired. But what ends up happening is that early 7:30 nap signals to their body clock, hey, you don't have to sleep any longer than 5 a.m. because you get this early nap. And then the whole day shifts too far early, too far forward, whichever it is. Everything becomes early. Nap 2 is early. Nap 3 is early. Bedtime is early. And then we're stuck in that, it's not actually early rising. You just went to bed in the 5s. So when I'm looking through a sleep log, you may need a bridging nap, but that's more so for like a 4-month-old baby. And that would look something like, okay, they've been awake from 5 to try and get to an 8:30 nap. is a big stretch for a 4-month-old. We might do a 10 to 15 minute max nap at, let's say, 6:45 and wake them and move on with your day. You still get in your nice big 7 a.m. feed and you just take the pressure off whilst you get all those other issues fixed. And it is a very short-term solution. It is not the long-term plan to have a bridging nap. Older babies, it will reinforce the early rise, and we just have to push through. So you do your sleep training, you do whatever you're going to do until 7 a.m. Baby doesn't go back to sleep, no problem. You push through to your schedule. Are they overtired? Yes, we understand that. It's a natural byproduct of the work that we're doing here. It is short-lived, and you have permission from the Nap Trap sleep consultants to fully assist your baby to get them off to sleep at the scheduled nap time, knowing that an overtired baby is going to have a really hard time self-settling off to sleep. So we can just take the pressure off. You can contact nap, pram nap, carrier nap, watch Netflix. We were just talking about our recommendation, what we've been binge watching. And you just help them so that you break that cycle of early nap, early rise. And that is one of the first places I start. And I almost get excited when I see it in a sleep log. I'm like, oh, gosh, there it is. Bingo. We can fix it.
And, you know, I don't really consider that to be sleep training. Like if you've got a little, you know, like that's just the holistic side of things, is that we're just trying to optimize the day. So we recognize, and like this is, it's so hard for families to sort of understand when they're conditioned to, you know, being primed and, you know, always considering wake windows. Like I don't want to overshoot, and like we bang on about wake windows too, don't get us wrong.
And overtiredness.
And overtiredness. But in this scenario, in order to move through your early rise challenge, there just has to be some sort of give somewhere. And this is not the sleep training side of things. This is just getting you onto a better, less sticky schedule through the day. Because if your nap is going to start, you know, for a 6-month-old, if they're you know, we're pushing them. You know, we can't get to a 9:30 if you're up from 5 o'clock, but we can definitely try and get as close to 9 as we can. And then if you are committed to sort of doing whatever you need to do for that nap, then you may just be holding them for an hour to get to 10 o'clock. And then from that point onwards, yes, you are then using your wake windows for the rest of the naps, because you've had your little one has had a decent nap. They have reduced their sleep pressure, and so now they're going to be able to do that full wake window. You'll put them down at the right time. They'll be able to self-settle or get themselves off to sleep more easily, and hopefully link that next one to create that normal sort of afternoon program as such, so that it will get you into a better stage for bedtime and having a better bed timing, if that makes sense.
Yeah. The way I often explain it to families, and even just think about it in my own head, is just like jet lag. If we've got an early wake with an early nap, they are just on a kind of a different time zone. And so if I go overseas now, I'm going to be a bit cranky and grumpy and a bit hungry and all the wrong time. Like I want a burger when I should be having bircher muesli. Like it is a bit wonky, but you push through so that your brain and your internal body clock picks up on the new pattern. And it's the same with that sort of, we're going to push out that first nap to fix the early rise and get them on the Melbourne time zone, the Sydney time, like wherever you are, we have to get them on your time zone.
I love the way that you explained it before when you were like, I can't correct it if I'm still going to eat a burger at 4 a.m. You know, like I can't, like there just needs to be a defining moment in terms of, okay, well, I need to make the change in order to create the new pattern. So, so that's an easy, it won't feel easy. I'm not sort of saying to families, oh gosh, it's totally easy to stretch a baby for 4 hours.
Fixing early rising is not easy.
No.
I will be the first to say, I know that what I am telling my families to do is not easy. It is not enjoyable. Will it work? Yes, if you follow the plan.
Yep, 100%. And I think it's because we just want to get those last few hours. We don't want to start the day on a really off, wicket, like we want to, it's so lovely to be able to start the day. Like waking up, everyone's happy, and the
Yeah.
birds are chirping, and they're beautiful birds out there.
Oh, yes. Look at
But
this.
and
Angelic.
like this, and like you just imagine like the steam from the coffee cup coming up, and like
Mm,
everyone's walking into the lounge room super like chipper.
just a
But
Nancy Myers movie.
yeah.
Yeah.
But the reality when you're doing the sleep work with an early rise is that it's it's going to be less of that until
Mm,
you resolve the issue. So it is really hard. And but following the plan will minimize the tears, will minimize the length of time it takes you in order to resolve the issue. Um, but early rising absolutely needs consistency, repetition,
mm.
and and I don't want to say it, a good backbone, because
Yeah,
you
you need to
just
have your
have to.
ducks in a row.
Yeah, you just want to be able to be super confident that you are working towards the greater good of something,
Mm.
and you need to be able to follow through. So you need that backbone to sort of go, we're good, we can keep doing this, I'm going to see it through, and then it will pay off. Something that I say to families all the time, and I may have mentioned this in a previous podcast, is that you'll never see the benefit of what you're doing in that moment. So particularly for night one or morning one, when you're doing an
Mm.
early rise, resettle and so forth, which we'll go into later, is that in that moment, you'll sort of go, oh my gosh, like this doesn't appear to be working. It doesn't sort of feel like we're going anywhere with this. But you'll never see the benefit in that moment. The benefit will pay off the following morning when it's a little less intense, or, you get that later wake, or your little one wakes, at the right time. It's
Mm.
never in that moment. It will pay off later on down the track. So you've always got to
Yeah.
think about your future self in that
Yeah.
moment.
Which is hard. And it's where having a sleep consultant in your back pocket to say, no, no,
Yes.
keep going. This is normal. Like, this is all
Yeah.
to be expected, rather than, oh my goodness, this isn't working. I'm going to throw in the towel.
Yeah.
That's
100%.
it, Hanny. So let's talk about, we briefly just touched on overtiredness. And yes, we fully accept that we're creating an overtired
Mm.
situation where we push through for that first nap. Overtiredness can also be a cause of early rising from a
Mm.
scheduling perspective. So if you've dropped the third nap too early, if you've got a 6-month-old baby and you've dropped the third nap and you end up with this really long wake window to try and keep bedtime in the 7s so that you don't get an early rise, it often backfires. The natural spike in cortisol will cause early rising.
Mm.
So that is another thing to consider. And it's always, I feel it's always so confusing for parents, because we're like, undertiredness can cause early rising,
Mm.
overtiredness can cause early rising.
Yeah.
Where is the sweet spot?
Yeah.
Someone tell me where the sweet spot is. And that's where having just a really great, simple, age appropriate schedule, including
Mm.
feeds, naps, building sleep pressure in all the right places, just gives you the recipe so that you can confidently get to 5 a.m. and sort it out. And by sort it out, I mean probably sleep train it out.
Yeah.
But we need to get there in the first place. So always having a look at, was that wake window before bed really long?
Mm.
Yes, that could be contributing to this ongoing early rise that we've got.
Mm. Yeah. If you're ever in doubt about your scheduling, then, we've got multiple options for you to look at on our social media pages and so forth. Like, we're often giving free tips on routines and so forth. But it is, before we're even thinking about focusing on the early rise and fixing it, you do need to be watertight with how your day looks, so that you can rule out these, that could be underlying issues that are contributing to the early rise. So we really want to make sure that we've got great naps in all the right spots. Calories are amazing through the day. You've got your solids in at the right times and so forth. You want to look at all the things that could be from like a room perspective, like is the sun coming up? I think we've touched on that, making sure your little one is nice and warm. So doing all of those things. And then it's a case of, okay, well, are you keeping your feed in the mix? If you are keeping your feed in the mix, totally fine. That's all good. You just want to make sure that it's well structured and you've got a plan for that. And then, when we're going in with an early rise aspect, then having that plan sorted of how you're going to tackle it so that you can be really confident that you're following through all the steps that you need to take in order to resolve it.
It's great that you just recapped that, because in order to discuss what we're about to discuss, which is, well, how do I actually fix it? You need to have done your homework first. So all of those things you just mentioned, once you know that those are tickety-boo, sorted, mental checklist ticked, now we get to 5 a.m. And this is where I do see, understandably, parents accidentally reinforcing the early rise, because coming into mum and dad's bed, and if that's fine and you all just go back to sleep or it's nice to cuddle, that's fine. But if it's creating this early rise and you're like, this isn't sustainable. I was trying to do it so they'd go back to sleep and they don't. They just roll around and like open my eyelids and, like doona on, doona off. Then that socialization is worth waking up for. Similarly, if you think, oh, for heaven's sake, I can't face it anymore, here, watch Bluey, that's worth waking up for. Oh, I'm just going to feed you.
It just sets the clock.
Yeah, it sets the clock.
There's stimulation happening at that time. It'll create the habitual wake.
Yes.
So it's not going anywhere.
It's not going anywhere. And we all have to pick our battles. Like I have definitely, I remember an infamous trip to Castlemaine on a Mother's Day that did not go well. And the heating turned off at 2 a.m. and it was icicles and we were getting ready to leave at like 4 a.m. in the morning. And I parked children in front of Bluey, with a yogurt being like, just watch this and please be quiet whilst we try and get out of here, and we hightail it. So sometimes we do have to pick our battles. But if this is an ongoing thing, these are the things that we can also just look at, like, oh, I think this might be contributing to this. Similarly, if you haven't even a much older baby and you're like, but they keep waking for a full bottle at 5 a.m. even though like they do not, 21 months doesn't need a bottle at 5 a.m. It's worth waking up for. Their brain thinks, I need these calories. This is what happens at this time. So having a look at how you can be doing less, if you can identify, oh, I think I might be playing a role in exacerbating this early rise, which brings us to the sleep training it out. And you can tell we've kind of kicked the can down the road because you have to have done the other stuff. You can't just sleep train out and then have a really early nap. You can't just sleep train through genuine hunger. We talked about that last week. You can't sleep train through bright lights being turned on at 5 a.m. or the sun streaming through. It's not going to work, and it's really not going to be enjoyable for anyone. So let's assume from here on out, everything's lined up. Everything's good. Now it becomes about not getting your baby up and sleep training out until the desired wake up time. And for you and I, we usually call that about 6:45, 7 a.m. So we would treat everything prior to that as an overnight waking. So let's say baby is waking at 5, that is an overnight waking. If it was 11 p.m. or 1 a.m., we're not getting baby up to start the day. We're not popping Bluey on, I hope. You would be resettling. And so I would be looking to sleep train this out. The key to remember here that unlike 11 p.m. and even 1 a.m., sleep pressure at 5 a.m. and melatonin is very much on its way out. It is a very, very fragile time of the morning. So something more significantly hands-on in terms of resettling that may work at 11 p.m., it doesn't often work in the 5s. So this is where I would usually use a very low stimulation sleep training technique. Timed checks. It is not about getting the baby to go back to sleep, which I think often is confusing for parents. Hang on, I'm doing all of this and they're not going back to sleep. This isn't working. It's not about that. It is about not starting the day.
It's about the delay. So we mention to our families all the time, delay, delay, delay. Because if our little ones are waking at 5 a.m. and there's not a whole lot going on, so there's no milk, there's no Bluey, there's no yogurts, there's no jumping into mum and dad's bed, but all the fun stuff is happening at, say, 6:45, 7 a.m., the internal clock is heavily influenced by stimulation and light and dark. So while we're working at 5 a.m. to move through it, we're trying to get to 6:45, 7 a.m. where we can then introduce light. So, we're opening the curtains,
Blinds open.
we're going into the lounge, good morning, everybody. The tone of our voice is so much different. We're having milk, we're doing all the fun stuff at that particular time. So when we are doing the sleep work at 5 o'clock, our goal isn't necessarily to get our little ones back off to sleep. Our goal is to get to 6:45, 7 a.m. to set the clock for this is when the action happens, so that then over time and, a series of days to a week to 10 days, you'll find that instead of your little one waking at 5 o'clock in the morning to kickstart, the clock will then start waking closer to when all the action is happening. So quite often in early rise, the transition to better sleep or away from the early rise is that you'll find that instead of waking at 5, it will then become 5:10. Then the next day it might be 5:20. Then the next day it might be 5:40 and so forth. So the wake, instead of thinking about your little one needing to go back off to sleep, what you're looking for is that wake time to start getting later. I hope that makes sense. Does that make sense to you, Sally, the way I've described that?
Yeah, definitely. I think the analogy of jet lag is really helpful here because I think if I am used to waking at a certain time, like I'm lying in my bed in London on Australian time, I'm wide awake at 4 a.m. I'm not going to get up and go and give my brain food, light, and socialization because then I know that is going to perpetuate. I'm going to lie in the dark until the desired wake up time, even though I know my brain is not going back to sleep, so that I've reset. And then I open the blinds, I turn on the news, I order my breakfast, and the day begins. And that is what the plan that's what this is about. The delay is about saying to their brain, it's still dark. We're not doing anything fun. There is nothing worth waking up for now. It is the middle of the night. We're going to treat it as such. So, but I think one of the main questions then from this would be, okay, that's great. I'm happy to leave my baby in their cot until 7. I understand the logic here. My baby is awake. What am I going to do, particularly if my baby's escalated and crying, which chances are at some point they're like, okay, the novelty's worn off. Like, get me up now.
Where are you? Come back.
This is where the trickiness of the sleep training comes in. And I say tricky because it's a yucky time of the morning for everyone. Chances are a baby is crying and we've got 2 hours. We're looking at from 5 a.m. till 7 a.m. to sleep train a baby that may not go back to sleep initially. And this is where your mantra of what will your future self thank you for comes into play. We're not doing it for that day. We are doing it for the long-term success and the fixing of the early rise. So a technique that I will often use with my families is a very low stimulation 10-minute timed check. So if you want to call it a modified Ferber, great. It essentially is. You would just, if your baby's just hanging out in their cot, blowing raspberries and having a chat 5 a.m., no need for anything. Less is so much more, particularly in these early hours of the morning. If you are going in like a jack in the box, that is so stimulating. Again, it's just not going to do what you want it to do. So I might do, let's say baby's escalated, baby is crying. I might set my timer for 10 minutes. You could probably do 5 for a younger baby. And if that felt more aligned with your comfort levels, again, less is more. So I might do 10. You would then just probably put your head through the door and say, for example, I always say, shh, 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 mummy loves you. Whatever your sleepy phrase is that maybe you use at 11 p.m. or when you initially sleep trained, something so low key or even just a big shh, shh, shh. And then you close the door. Will baby be a bit angry? Potentially. You're not getting them up, you're not giving them a yogurt, and you're not putting on Bluey. That's where the hard work is.
Yeah.
And you're going to do that until 7 a.m.
I like to also give my families the option. So this is where, of course, we are on the same page, but we do things slightly differently. I like to encourage my families who would like to do a little bit more just to be more of a ninja. So if
Yeah.
you want to, because, quite often they're throwing dummies out, they've thrown their comforter out, I would
Mm,
just ninja in. So you're like a little enigma. You're going in, you're handing the comforter over or the
yep.
dummy, and then you're walking straight back out. You're not saying anything. So, that in a sense is low stim, but you're in, you're out,
Would
like
you
you're
still
literally.
do that at a timed a timed interval, or would
Yeah.
you do that
Yeah,
just
once
the
every 10
moment the
minutes.
dummy gets thrown out?
No, 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 no.
Yeah.
So once every 7 to 10 minutes
Yep.
is my sort of guide. I try and encourage families, like if at the 7 minute mark they've gone quiet, then hold off.
Yes. Yep.
If at the 10 minute mark they've gone quiet, hold off. Less is more, and certainly just letting it all unfold if it's just low grade. Like you're just
Yes.
it's yeah.
Yep. Then what I commonly see is that at 6:36, a
Oh
baby
yes,
will
yeah, yeah,
go back to
yeah,
sleep.
yes,
And so sometimes I work with families who say, "Oh, look, baby woke at 5 and come 6:15. Like I delayed getting up. I got them out at 6:15." And that is such a great start.
yeah,
We are now going to extend that till 7. We almost have to overreach
yeah,
in
overreaching,
order to correct it,
yeah,
so that they have an opportunity to actually fall back asleep. Because if we get them up at 6:15, great, huge amount of learning has happened, but we have missed that golden 6:36 a.m. that I
mm,
see babies start to nod back off. And so we want to give them maximum opportunity to do that. And if they do that, amazing. 7 maximum, probably 7:15, I would say you wake them.
yeah,
And what they have shown you is that they do, in fact, still have sleep pressure. It is working. And
mm,
now you can have increased confidence like, okay, now we're going to continue on. The other thing I will commonly see is, and maybe not so much on morning 1, but maybe more so on morning 2, 3, and beyond, is that baby may not go back to sleep fully, but they have, I kind of call them long blinks, where they
oh
just sort
yeah,
of go quiet, particularly if they've been
mm,
standing up and escalated, and then they might lie down even for 1 to 2 minutes, and then it
yeah,
starts up again. So it's a long blink. They haven't gone properly to sleep. That is progress. So hold on to that as well
yes,
as a win.
yep,
Even if it's just this really choppy on again, off again, on again, off again for 2 hours, progress has been made, because that blink then
mm,
becomes asleep, falling back asleep, or staying asleep. And we're on the up.
yeah, absolutely. And those little tiny naps are an indicator that there is absolutely scope for your little one. Like you are on the right track. They are able to go back off to sleep, and that they do need a little bit extra. So, um, I I also want to touch on, how you were saying before, Sally, about overcorrecting. We're
Mm,
working towards 6:45, 7 a.m. We're not necessarily, and it goes back to that 11 to 12 hours, we're not necessarily wanting your little one to sleep all the way through until 6:45 or 7 a.m.
mm,
We are working towards that, and it will hold that as the uptime for the internal
mm,
clock. But really, again, we're falling back to, are they getting their 11 to 12 hours? So if your little one, so the actual aim is that your little one wakes sometime after the 11-hour mark, and that when they wake, they are happy to chill in the cot, muck around. If they're old enough to have a little comforter or toy or something like that in there, they can
mm.
they can play with that, or play with their toes, have a little chitty chat to themselves. But they recognise that uptime isn't quite there yet, and
Mm.
then they're happy just to muck around until it's time for mum and dad to get them up. So the goal isn't necessarily always to have a little one that sleeps all the way through till 7. Like obviously for a little one that can sleep the 12 hours, if they're going down at 7, they can sleep until 7 in the
Mm.
morning. But if your little one is waking realistically around that 6:15, 6:20 mark, the ideal scenario is that they're waking and they're happy enough just to muck around and hang out for a little while
I'm so
longer.
glad you mentioned that, because, and this is going to sound like a shameless plug here, but
Mm.
in my Baby Sleep membership called Snooze Social, Beck, you are my amazing moderator in there with me. And something you wrote to one of the members this week really resonated with the whole group, and people saying, can we tag everyone? Like, we all need to read this differentiation between what is awake time versus up time. And I think that's where you might be working on fixing an early rise and then think, but my baby's waking at 6:20 and not versus why aren't they sleeping until 7? For me, 6:20, and we're assuming like we're on one of our schedules, right? They've gone to bed somewhere between 7 and 7:30. They wake at 6:20. Fantastic.
Amazing.
Your baby does not have to be asleep all the way until 7 a.m.
Yeah, no.
But what I also find is that by having this just ongoing assumed delay in getting up where a baby can feel safe and happy to hang out, it's just the process every single morning, is that when a baby is sick, when a baby has, I don't know, like or older toddler, like had a bad dream or a bad day of childcare naps the day before, and they are needing to take more sleep naturally, they're needing to catch up, they're not feeling well, whatever it is, they sort of already have that almost permission to keep sleeping because the alarm isn't that I wake up, mum and dad get me up immediately.
Yes, there's a buffer.
Yeah, they can doze. And I know as an adult, like I love that feeling of I know I'm awake, but I don't have to get up yet.
Yes, oh my God, so good.
I'm just going to stay. Yes, I'm just going to. Although I've got young children, so it doesn't really feel like that. But like on holidays, but I still remember the distant memory of that. But you know, I've even noticed it this week in my house. My 3 and a bit year old, he must be going through a big growth spurt. We're back at kinder. He's so happy, and he is my 6:20 little rooster that then hangs out and he plays with cars in his cot until 6:45, 7 a.m.
Yeah.
But he has been sleeping until 7:30 and he has obviously needed it. And I've been thinking about it in the context of this episode leading up because I think, if I'd always just got him up at 6, I don't think he'd do this. But he just has this allowance and he's taken it.
There's also that idea that your sleep becomes a little fragile in the lead up to your wake time. So this is another reason why we sort of hold off until 7, because in the hour leading up, that sort of gets you to that 6. If you'd set your, and you know, this is totally fine. For some families, they need to have their structure at say 6 till 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. to fit their life schedule.
Yeah, they got to get out the door, and that's
But you know, like if you are getting up at 6:15 and it's not necessarily a need to get up at that time, then quite often your little one's sleep will become fragile around that 5:15 mark. So then they're holding off to get to this. So it's one of those things. It's holding space. 6:45, 7 a.m. uptime is holding space for your little one to wake and be relaxed and enjoy a little bit of downtime with themselves. And then it offers the opportunity to have a buffer there if they do want to go back off to sleep for whatever reason. So there's a lot of benefits. There's a lot of benefits. There's a lot of method to the madness of why we work on the early rise and the timings that we keep.
And I will say, I think it's important to know that fixing an early rise, great if it happens pretty quickly. Some babies do respond, and it's usually they're just very easy sleepers. But it can take a solid 7 to 10 days, just like it would if I was in London right now. We are working with the internal body clock, your baby's circadian rhythm. It is not a quick fix, unfortunately, but keep going. So even if you've done 3 days, keep going.
Yeah. It's the same as when, you know, like naps are notoriously hard sometimes to get going. And I always say it may not happen on the 10th time, but on the 11th it does, and it all falls into place.
Yeah.
And you've just got to keep that mantra happening with your early rise. Repetition, consistency is going to be your friend.
Yep.
2 friends.
Absolutely. And know that we're cheering you on. In solidarity, we know it's what we're prescribing isn't easy, but we do it all the time, and it works.
we know that it works.
If you, and I think the other thing, just to add to that, is that sometimes it can be 2 steps forward, 1 step back. You might on day 4 have a 6:20 wake, but then the next day it slips to 5:50. You don't panic. We don't fix. You just keep going.
Yep.
And it will fall into place.
Yep, don't panic.
I hope this all makes sense. I feel like you and I, it makes sense in our heads.
Yeah, I think because we do it every day and we're teaching every day, but it's one thing to explain it to a client when we've gone through all, we've lined everything up, we've optimized sleep in every sort of way. So we kind of we know where our clients are up to. So it's quite easy for us to sort of do that last little 5%. When you're trying to explain it to families who maybe need to analyze their day a little more in order to create, have a really good, confident and successful early rise training element. I think hopefully we are able to explain it away in a way explain it in a way that does feel like it makes sense.
I guess in summary of this episode, you need to go and listen to the first one and make sure that we've sort of identified the root cause. We've created the optimal sleep environment, calories, all of the things in there that need to be ticked off before we then have a look at your scheduling, making sure that you are on an age-appropriate nap schedule and that your first nap of the day is not falling too early to avoid overtiredness. We're actually going to embrace the overtiredness, push through to the age-appropriate schedule. If you don't know what an age-appropriate schedule would be for your baby, that is where reach out to one of us and we can do a bit of a schedule tweak. And as you said before, Beck, we often put up example schedules in our social media posts.
Yep.
Then we want to make sure by being on that schedule, your baby is not undertired and is not overtired and bedtime is not too early, so that come 5 a.m. or whatever ungodly hour it is that the alarm clock is going off in your baby's nursery, that you can confidently sleep train it out with a very low stimulation technique. Less is going to be more. It's going to take a solid 7 to 10 days for a lot of babies. It is about consistency and opportunity and repetition, and on the first morning, maybe even the second, or maybe the third morning, your baby may not go back to sleep. That does not mean it is not working. We are retraining the body clock and it needs time. Then come 7 a.m., blinds open, big happy greeting, a hit of endorphin. Look at that, mum and dad always come back and get me. That was a pretty rough 2 hours. But look, I have gotten everything because look at that huge bottle of milk. It's all in the past. We put a line through it and we move on with the schedule.
Yeah, perfect. Lovely.
Amazing.
I love the summary.
Excellent.
I feel like I could tackle it myself.
Who needs ChatGPT when you've got me?
Oh my goodness, well done.
All right. Well, I think that's the end of our early rising.
Yeah, and I was really
Palooza.
excited to do this. It's been a long time coming, our little chitty chat on this, so I'm glad we've got it done. I'm sure a load of families are going to benefit from these tips, so excited to have them tackle it.
If it all feels overwhelming, you know where to find us. And if you don't, it's in the show notes. All right, we will see you on the next episode of Nap Trapped.
See you later, team. Goodbye.
Bye.